It would help if I could just talk instead of just mumbling nonsense at the camera. I think what we need is a Diet Dr. Pepper, because I can't get my mouth to work right, and English being the only language I speak is not working for me right now. Hold on, let me caffeinate real quick. Solely reliant on the fact that caffeine makes up a large percentage of my blood. God, that's good. Hi friends, welcome back to another pizza party. I'm Mrs. Pizza. Both of my sweet baby girls, Winnie and Cheese, are in the cheese spot. They are both doing the snoozes because it is probably going to be one of the hottest days of the entire year today. It's sweltering. So we've already done everything outside that we need to do. We went on walks at the crack of dawn. So did everyone else. I have never seen it that busy at like 6:30 in the morning outside. Everybody was like, get out, walk your dog while you still can. Anyways, I'm here to start a reading vlog. Well, technically I'm here to start a reading vlog I've already finished. I'm currently time traveling, but this ends up working better for me because, as any moody mood reader will tell you, me trying to extensively plan what I'm going to read never goes well. My brain instantly finds what I've decided I'm going to read to be the most unattractive books, and all the other books would be much better. Read those books. So if I have some kind of loose plan that my brain can function within, that usually works better. I also just realized that I forgot to put on mascara, and I'm currently in my house, so I could go put mascara on. But if you're here only because I usually wear mascara and it truly offends you that I'm not, I don't think that we're as good of friends as you thought. Maybe we should reevaluate our friendship. Anyways, I'm here to start a reading vlog, and the reading I've been doing recently was because I noticed a bit of a hole in my reading history, and that was when I decided that this needed to be remedied. See, I learned, and because I learned, you now have to learn. You probably already learned. You've probably been living your life with this information. I'm the only person out here that didn't know this. But in order for something to be considered vintage, it needs to be over 20 years old. Does that mean that everybody celebrating their 21st birthday is suddenly a vintage thing? No. If you're 21 years old, you're still a baby. You're practically a fetus. The fact that books written pre the year 2006 are now considered vintage, that makes me feel significantly ancient. I feel like the Crypt Keeper. I feel like I'm just ancient, but I'm kind of okay with that. I'm an indoor cat. I like my grandma hobbies. Being ancient doesn't necessarily make me feel bad. Sometimes it's just surprising to me. I was looking back at some of my reading history and realized that though I have consumed an ungodly amount of horror this year, I haven't done so great at reading backlist horror. Asterisk. I have tried a decent amount, but have found that things that are written of a certain time tend to have a lot of language, ideas, and perspectives that perhaps didn't age well. That's me being very gentle. Now, I am willing to forgive a lot of that in books within reason, right? I don't want to read something absolutely egregious, but I can understand that perhaps ideals have changed. And so I was trying to find books within the vintage horror category that I could enjoy. That being said, let's start this off before you absolutely go bananas in the comments. But actually, go bananas in the comments. Go crazy. I love it. I feel like I need to start this off with some recommendations of books that are considered vintage that I have read in the horror genre and enjoyed. I'm not going to tell you about a book I absolutely hated. What would be the point of that? Well, if I absolutely hated it, I would tell you I absolutely hated it, but we're not here to be negative. Anyways, I am so easily sidetracked. Okay, these are so that you understand how tiny my jumping into vintage horror was. Books I have read and enjoyed: The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty. This is a classic, and you should know that the author was also in charge of the screenplay and heavily involved in the making of the movie, and he ended up directing the third Exorcist movie, I believe, which is called Legion. So he is very present in the movie The Exorcist. Specifically in the dialogue, this is very... I don't know if you can hear that, but he just like nuclear sneezed back there. That was there it is again. Are you okay? I think he survived. Okay, this has a lot of really quippy, fast-moving dialogue, which works well, and I think is very present, especially in the third Exorcist movie. These dialogues between characters that's very snappy, quick, can have funny moments, but has this very specific to this author type of cadence. I actually really enjoyed this. I don't think it's scary, but I don't think that the Exorcist movie is scary. I think at the time it came out that people were like fainting in the movie theater and stuff like that. Times they have changed, and our tolerance for horror has definitely changed. This is in line with the horror from the movie The Exorcist, where the true horror is that Regan has been possessed maybe by a demon, and we are really focusing on all of the people around Regan, but also that's the whole point of the possession, is how Regan being possessed by a demon affects the people around her. I actually really liked this. I thought it was really fast to get through, and if you're a true horror fan, it's something that you have to check off the list at some point. If you can hear the air conditioner, it just turned on. I refuse to turn it off. It's a million degrees outside and I don't want to be sweaty. Another vintage demon possession book that I enjoyed, I think I ended up giving it 3 stars, was Come Closer. This came out in the early 2000s and is a demon possession book where you are following a woman who believes that she is slowly being taken over by some sort of demonic entity. It's similar to The Exorcist and a lot of other demonic possession books that I've enjoyed. Doesn't tend to be like over the top, is more of a slow crawl into the demon possession, the horror being this inevitability of the demonic. And sometimes there are bursts of violence, but overall not incredibly gory. I enjoyed it just fine. I think it's one of those books when you start reading demon possession books, it is on the top of everyone's list. We are not going to go into a lot of detail about these, but as you probably know, one of the most prolific vintage horror authors, one of the most prolific authors in existence is Stephen King. I have made it through a handful of Stephen King books. I am by no means well read in Stephen King's backlist. I have been trying to just pick up the greatest hits. I am sure on the internet, there's a plethora of diehard Stephen King fans who can do deep dives, have done deep dives, know all the symbols and the Easter eggs and the reading orders and things like that. I personally have only read a handful of them, so I am not your source for all things Stephen King. That being said, the ones I think are worth your time: Pet Sematary. It's considered one of his scariest. I think Stephen King thinks it is the scariest book he's ever written. I could be misquoting something, but I refuse to check. This is the story of a family who moves into a new home on a very busy street, and they find a pet cemetery located on their property where all the local children come to bury their dead pets. And it's terrifying and horrible and very, very scary. But also scary is subjective. Like, this is scary again in subject matter, in theory, in like thinking about the outcomes. And anyways, Misery, which I think technically is more of a thriller horror, but Misery, this is the story of an author who is in a car wreck and is saved by his #1 fan. And she's one of the scariest people ever. The book is so much more gory and graphic than the movie, which I think, again, is a product of the time. But I really enjoyed Misery. And this is usually one of the books that everybody says is their favorite by Stephen King. The Shining. Obviously, I've read The Shining. I had to read The Shining. Can I even say I like horror books if I haven't read The Shining? The Shining being Stephen King's haunted hotel book. If you haven't read The Shining, I don't think I should be the one to tell you about The Shining. But it is very different than the movie, and so if you watch the movie and think you know everything, you can read the book and be pleasantly surprised by how different it is. Salem's Lot. I've read Stephen King talking about vampires. This is a small town. There is a main character, but the town itself is kind of a character within the story. Having recently watched Widow's Bay, I hope this isn't a spoiler, but Widow's Bay isn't about vampires, but it is like a horror in a small town, and I know that the show creator of Widow's Bay is a huge Stephen King fan. And so I feel like there are echoes of a lot of these books in Stephen King's backlist that kind of influence Widow's Bay. Honestly, Widow's Bay just needs to start sending me checks, because in real life, I can't stop talking about it. I make everyone watch it. Like, we can't talk anymore until you've watched this show, and then we can talk about the show, and then we can move forward with the rest of our actual friendship. But until then, no, it's on pause. Go watch Widow's Bay. Anyways, one of the books that I don't hear talked about that much that I think is worth your time, The Elementals. This is a what I would call fresh take or different take on the haunted house trope, because this is taking place on a beach in like stifling hot weather, where I feel like most haunted houses tend to be misty and dark and secluded in the woods. This is a haunted house situation happening in the high heat of the summer with stifling humidity surrounded by sand. This is a story of two very wealthy families that are intertwined with each other when one of the, I think it's the matriarch of one of the families. Yes. The matriarch of the Savage family has passed away, and so both families get together to travel to their beach houses, which are set together, very secluded, far away from everything else. It's a set of 3 beach houses. So one family owns one family owns the other, and the third house is vacant and being devoured by the sand. And this is these people being secluded with ooky spooky things out in the middle of these like haunted sand dunes. I really, truly enjoyed this. This author was actually the writer of the screenplay, I believe, yes, like the original writer for Beetlejuice, which all-time favorite movie, but has a book series that a lot of people truly enjoy that I haven't gotten to yet. I think it's like a gothic book series. I believe it's called like Black Water or something like that. Very like pulpy horror writer of the time. When was this originally? This originally was published in 1981. So this is like 80s horror. Oh, he also wrote the screenplay for The Nightmare Before Christmas. So Tim Burton must be a fan. So really what my goal was to read more books, more horror books from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and early 2000s, because oh my God, what is time? And so I decided to try and chip away at some of those in this vlog. The first book that I'm going to be picking up is a modern classic, and it's definitely a crime I hadn't gotten to it. And that's gonna be Rosemary's Baby. Let's do some reading. If we are sitting here, we know what we're doing, right? We're doing our nails and we're chit-chatting about books. Because it's once again time to do my nails. And once again, time to talk about a book so that I can continue reading a book. Because the problem is that I feel like I need to check in with you by the halfway point, and I want to blow past that a lot of the time and just keep on reading. I mean, I guess these are my videos and I can do what I want, so who knows? I got some new stuff because I can't stop buying nail polish. We have a color called Pale Rose and a color called Shell Beige. But the reason I want to use a neutral is I got some like cool, fun, sparkly shimmery powder. I want to try it. I want to see. I want to do what I can do. I'm just going to keep leveling up my nail situation. We are here because I've reached the halfway point of Rosemary's Baby. This is an interesting reading experience, seeing as how I know what this story is about. I am sure at some point I have watched at least a portion of the movie. Because I know the spoilers, is how we'll put it, I'm reading this with that knowledge, but I'm reading it for the first time with that knowledge. So I am constantly picking up clues and trying to read into everything, knowing the outcome I do, but I don't know any of the plot points. Like I don't know how we get from A to B. And so I'm still very intrigued and interested in what's happening. If you don't know the story of Rosemary's Baby, congratulations on being incredibly good at avoiding spoilers. The elevator pitch for this is the worst possible pregnancy situation ever. This is the story of Rosemary and her husband Guy, who is an actor. They live in New York City. In the opening of this book, they're trying to get a new apartment. They get a phone call that like their dream apartment and this very gothic type apartment building has become available. They've been on the wait list for an apartment here for forever. They had actually just found an apartment somewhere else, and Guy calls, lies his off, gets them out of that apartment, and they move into their brand new ooky spooky apartment with all of the character. They then start meeting people in the apartment complex. They are quickly informed in the beginning from a friend of Rosemary's, who was kind of like a father figure to her, that the apartment they've moved into is like 101 Weird Avenue. This place is kind of notorious for there being all sorts of strange things happening, including quite a few dead bodies. Rosemary and Guy cannot be deterred. They want this apartment. They want to live here. So they move in to this sinister feeling apartment complex. Almost immediately, the other inhabitants of the apartment complex start reaching out and trying to create a relationship with Rosemary. And how they are depicted is very interesting. They are elderly couples that are trying to come across as kindly and caring and just a little bit nosy in the most innocent and innocuous of ways. But they dress in very loud colors. They have very loud conversations and big opinions. There's just something about them that feels off, like it's trying to project that they're safe and silly and just a little bit odd in the sweet way. But because I know that this is a horror book, I am very much picking up that the offness of them is not innocent. It is nefarious. We are at the halfway point, have had a scene that is a dream sequence that I know, because I kind of know where this is going, was most likely not a dream. It's also interesting being able to pick up on all of these things that are going on with Guy that are just kind of casually mentioned, other people in the apartment complex that are just casually mentioned. But because I know that everything is bad, I'm able to pick up all the breadcrumbs. Like, I feel like I'm just hoarding breadcrumbs. Like somebody could sneeze 2 doors down and I'm like, that's a sign. I know that that is important. I'm actually really enjoying this. Like, I really am enjoying this, even though it's a very different reading experience, having basically the biggest spoiler ever, knowing where it's going, yet not knowing the story itself, and just kind of riding along, knowing what our destination is. I have a few physical books on my shelves that I think would fit for more of a vintage type horror situation that I would really like to get to, but I'm struggling finding an audiobook. I've picked up a couple that were available at the library and just almost instantly put them down. Some things just don't age well. One of the ones that I think was the most egregious was I picked up Jaws. I've seen Jaws, I know where Jaws is going, and I thought, oh, creature feature, Jaws, like this, and almost immediately was like, this is someone trying so hard to write like Stephen King and just not getting it right. That's probably an oversimplification of what was happening there. I was not enjoying Jaws. I don't want to know about every single woman's body. We were just talking about a lot of weird, gross stuff. It just was coming across like misogynistic really early. Sign of the times, right? Still looking for something that I can enjoy that is vintage without it immediately making all my hackles go up and go, ooh, gross. Why are we talking about this? And not a fun way, and not a like horror way where I'm like, ooh, gross, drippy, awful horror. Like that I'm in for, but like, ooh, gross, making me uncomfortable with your strange takes on everything. Just things that would not fly in today's world. So still looking for an audiobook, but I think I know what physical book I'm going to be picking up since I'm reading Rosemary's Baby as an ebook from the library right now. But that's where we are. Now let me actually do my nails instead of just waving my hands around the nail area. I finished a book. I also have something going on with my eyeballs right now, and so if it looks like I've been crying, I have not been crying. If not, didn't cry today. Just my eyes have just been like running all day long, so I just look very forlorn. But I finished Rosemary's Baby and had an absolutely great time. But I do wonder what the reading experience would be like if you didn't know about Rosemary's Baby. But unfortunately, I live in the year of our Lord, 2026, and so was unable to avoid spoilers. I know what Rosemary's Baby is about, but had the best time picking up the breadcrumbs, just walking along with the author, being like, that's suspicious, you're suspicious, that's suspicious over and over and over again, knowing what the outcome was, but not knowing the journey getting there. This is actually quite funny if you know where this is going. You can pick up when Rosemary is being gaslit by another character. It is established pretty early on that her husband, this actor, is an incredible liar. Rosemary knows this. But man, did I hate this man. He is just so, he's very opportunistic. But I also think it was interesting how Rosemary dealt with everything that was happening to her. There is obviously a cult-like element involved. Rosemary is not picking up on all of these red flags that are just parading right past her. But this is taking place in the 70s. There are just differences. She can't Google something. She can't be like, how many cult members have resided in my apartment building? She's basically has to look for books or listen to gossip, just kind of put pieces together based on conversation she's had. Rosemary doesn't have the ability to really research what's going on. I do think that when she finds an answer, even though, yes, the pieces all do slide into place for this to be the answer, I find it quite interesting that she was so blind to something and then so willing to take it as truth. That being said, I really want to pick up more from this author. I thought this was such a fun and wild ride. And I think the fact that this was written in the 70s, and though there is some word usage that isn't necessarily something that we would use today, this didn't feel like something that was innately full of just the worst type of language and stereotypes and things like that some of these books tend to present really early on. Don't get me wrong, like this is definitely of a time, but it feels like the chauvinism and the stereotypes and the different types of things that we would look down on as just gross now were also being used to show you how that would be used to take advantage, if that all makes sense. I feel like I just haven't had the best luck finding books that don't come across as like grossly of their time. The kind of things where like the racism or the sexism or the ideals of the time are so gross that I don't want to read it. Just, it's so hard to read something that has so much of those undertones, where in this, there is a little bit of that. The reason some of these people are getting away with this is because of these undertones. And it was interesting. It was interesting. I liked it. I think it was a really good book. And if, like me, you already know about Rosemary's Baby, but you've never read the book or seen the movie, you can read this and still enjoy your time. If anything, I felt like I enjoyed my time greatly because I was able to see all of these red flags that Rosemary was missing. But I don't know what I'm gonna pick up next. Like I said, I've tried to pick up a few things and just nothing has really been working. When I Google, because I do not live in the 1970s and the internet is available to me on every device in my house, I have been trying to look for like, what are the best books from the 70s? What are the best horror books from the 70s and the 80s and the 90s? And it's either books I've already read and enjoyed, so I understand why they're on everybody's list, or they're books I've tried to read and immediately just, they grossed me out. Like, and not in a, like I've said, not in a fun way, in a, oh, okay, so you're just a gross human kind of way. But I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to pick up next.
Chapter 1. Will Graham sat Crawford down at a picnic table between the house and the ocean.
I did a thing. I was really excited to pick up a book and found that I had access to the audiobook for free. Well, not for free. I pay for the subscription to the service, though. Had it available for me to listen right then and there. So I picked up Red Dragon because this came out in the 80s. We've read a book from the 70s. I decided to pick up a horror book from the 80s. And honestly, I feel like it's kind of a crime that I haven't read anything that involves our favorite cannibal, Hannibal. I think I found this in a free little library. This is like the mass market paperback that's obviously the movie tie-in. This is the start, the introduction to Hannibal the Cannibal. And I picked up that audiobook and devoured it in one day. I did not stop listening it. And this is like an average size book. It wasn't incredibly short. I was on that kind of like manic cleaning where I may have pulled the stove out from the wall to clean behind it. I don't know what that says about me, but my kitchen has never been cleaner. That being said, I devoured this without even telling you anything about how I was feeling, what was going on. Do you really need me to tell you what Red Dragon is about? Like, haven't you seen the movie? That honestly, the fact that I had never seen the movie but knew what Rosemary's Baby was about made it an interesting reading experience. Having seen all of the movies but never read the books, very different reading experience. The main point being, can you picture anyone other than Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal? Like, no. Even if they describe him as completely physically different, it's Anthony Hopkins. This is more of a like crime detective story. Hannibal actually is in a very teeny tiny bit of this book. I think they actually made him more of a central star in the movie. He is such a like sidebar character in this, but we are following a former member of the FBI forensic department named Will Graham, who in the opening of the story is living in the Florida Keys with his family when he is approached by his former boss because there is a
serial unaliver
who has been dubbed the Tooth Fairy, who has been breaking into homes and annihilating whole families. Will is very good at figuring out what the bad guys are thinking, and his boss kind of gaslights him into coming back, let's be real honest. Will's wife is not too happy about this situation, but Will ends up coming in to give his expertise in investigating who is doing the murders. We then follow him as he deduces. We also get point of view from said murderer, which is interesting because we are getting some of what he is doing while the police, FBI, everyone else is trying to find him. That being said, I think this is a strange reading experience because I do enjoy the movie and I don't know if the book was better. Usually you're like, yeah, the book was better. The book was so much better. I don't know. But I also think because I was ingesting this via audiobook and the audiobook narrator, though not a bad narrator, made some strange choices as far as his narration, especially with dialogue. This was fine. I see why people would be into this, especially having it come out in the 80s and be as brutal as it was, but also putting us in the head of the serial unaliver, that was not something that was done a lot back then. I think sometimes when you're revisiting old media, what was considered just dark and deprived and awful at the time, it kind of seems slightly tame the further you get along, but I didn't dislike it. Like, I will definitely pick up Silence of the Lambs now because I think there might be a little bit more of our friend Hannibal, the cannibal. Obviously, if it kept me company while I manic cleaned my entire kitchen, like down to the silverware drawer. It's absolutely sparkling now. But that means we need to pick up something from the 90s. So I did a little research, did a little digging, and was looking for horror books from the 90s that I hadn't heard of before. But I also wanted to pick up a female author because at this point I've read 2 books by dudes. Nothing against dudes, but like there's got to be some ladies out there doing some pretty significant horror in the 90s. So I found the book, The Cipher. This apparently won the Locus and the Bram Stoker Award, and I have never heard of it. Absolutely never heard of it. It's very, very short. And I'm only about 7 pages in, but I think I can kind of give you a little bit of a synopsis of what I think is going to happen. This is kind of a stream of consciousness story following our point of view of Nicholas. And in the opening, we meet him. He lives in this like grungy, dirty place. Sounds like everybody probably smells like stale cigarettes and piss. He has this woman that he's kind of in love with named Nakota. And him and Nakota travel down to the storage room in this very gross and grimy apartment where there is a black hole, just a hole. And they don't know what's in the hole or where the hole goes, but it has this like pull to it. And they just go and stare at the hole. And then Nakota is like, all right, see you later, bro, and leaves. But it feels like there's some sort of, might be like an allegory for like drug addiction or some sort of addiction, this like addiction to going to look at this hole that seems ominous. I don't know. It feels very stream of consciousness though, the way that we are just following Nicholas's train of thought as he talks about this hole, as he talks about Nakota, as he talks about his relationships, his life, how everything is gross and sticky. And I feel like maybe yellow and beige, just grimy. very grimy and very gross already. But hopefully this won't take me too long to get through. And this says on the front, this is a stone cold landmark of the genre. Be prepared, this book will change you. That seems very optimistic. Change me for what? Change me into who? I don't know. Let's see. So I finished Cipher. I actually finished it last night and had to sit with it for a minute. Had to sit with it for just a minute because I feel like if I had tried to sum up my thoughts and feelings immediately after finishing this, it would have been dead air. It would have been me staring off into space, slowly blinking, trying to collect myself. I did not like this. So if this is your favorite book, because I love you and cherish our friendship, I need you to skip this part. Or like hold your finger down on the screen so I sound like a chipmunk to make it more fun for me trashing your favorite book. How do I even, I've sat on it all night and I still don't know how to talk about it. This is a book brought to you by the perspective of Nicholas. And Nicholas is in the throes of addiction. Nicholas's substance of choice is alcohol. And he likes to get drunk constantly. And he is in a toxic relationship kind of with Koja, aka Strike, aka Jane. This woman has so many names, aliases, and they have found this hole, right? And that's really the book. That is all that happens. And it's kind of watching different forms of falling into cycles of addiction. Like this is definitely one giant metaphor about addiction. It is these people being seduced by oblivion, kind of the call of this black hole, just falling into it, aka addiction, whether that be to alcohol or whatever substance it is that, you know, line them all up, choose whichever one you want to take you on a downward spiral. But Nicholas and Koja, both are not good people. And so you are with these like not good people doing not good things in this grimy, disgusting environment, but like not really much happens. It took me so long to get through this because the writing style is incredibly hard. The subject matter of this book is hard, but how it is written is hard to read. For example, and I don't think, I'm gonna go towards the front, but honestly, it would be really hard for me to give you spoilers because like it's just people in the throes of addiction. So like things are happening, but like nothing's happening. Address. Let me literally pick a random, I was having to read portions of this out loud to myself to try and keep up and comprehend what I was reading, which this is not the kind of thing you want to be reading out loud, honestly. From a random page, a random passage for your try and digest. I went not to my door, but to the fun holes. Wet footprints. A curl of mud on the scuff wood of the hallway. Look, Ma, I'm a detective. It's Koja. In the fun hole. With a wrench. Or a dagger. Or a nuclear device. Or a baby's head floating limply in a jar. My hand, all at once, sorry, on the doorknob. A deep, cellular reluctance to see what might be in there, to be seen. I went in. Koja. Wet like a shower, mangy hair and mangy clothes. Some ratty sport coat hung over her bony, broken hanger's shoulders, and swiveling from her squat to face the opening door with a face wary as an animal seeing me. She had the balls to smile. Not a nice one, either. But did I really need to tell you that? Hey, it's editing Mrs. Pizza. I felt like I needed to clarify this. I probably didn't. You probably got it. But I was having to read portions of this out loud because if you can't tell from how I'm reading it, it was a succession of really short punctuation and then run-on sentences that were all stream of consciousness. When I'm making a deliberate pause while speaking, it's usually because that's where the punctuation is. It was really, really hard to read this form of stream of consciousness because the length of the sentences and how the stream of consciousness was broken up made it so you had to read it out loud to understand it. I hope that comes across. Okay, sorry. That wasn't even a bad one. There was one that I literally had to stop and read out loud to Mr. Pizza because I was like, tell me if you can comprehend what the hell. Nicholas is the type of person whose addiction has taken such a hold on him. And instead of taking responsibility, because that is something that he refuses to do in any capacity, take responsibility for anything in this book, he's infuriating. because his addiction is something that he views as happening to him. All these horrible things that are happening to him, and he has no power to deal with it. I'm so tired. Where there is a character that's like, yeah, you have the power to do something, do anything. What is wrong with you? Yet he completely lacks any sort of responsibility and just lets his addiction take hold. Koja is feral and insane and violent and awful to him. There is also this like unrequited love motif going on. Nicholas has these unrequited feelings for Nakota. Nakota has like an unrequited feelings for the fun hole. The fun hole has unrequited feelings for Nicholas. Everything is coveting the thing that doesn't want it. Like, it is so hard to read, hard to get through. It took me days, absolute days, to get through 216 pages. When usually I feel like this would be something that I could be like, and you could sit down and read it in one sitting. No. I hated reading this. I didn't enjoy my time. I didn't like it. It won a bunch of awards, but that stream of consciousness with this person who is so equal parts kind of selfish, but yet like tries to act like nothing is in his control. Everything is happening to him. None of this is my fault. It is definitely like, I'm sure, supposed to reflect people that are going through addiction and how they treat the people around them and how they treat themselves and how they view themselves and how they just let the addiction take them along and don't take any real responsibility for what's happening. But it's also this disease, this constant like thing that you're hearing and feeling and seeing. It's under your skin. Not a fun read. And I don't think you should read it unless you really want to. This is very divisive. Like, when you go and look at reviews, it's either like people saying 1 star, I DNF this was awful, or people saying like 5 stars, I had to stare at the wall and cry afterwards. I think that's wholly going to be based on how you relate this to your own personal experiences or the experiences of people in your life. If this book is a reflection of people you are close to going through addiction, I think it would be very impactful. If you are someone that doesn't suffer from addiction at all, it just feels like sitting in this gross, grimy room with a bunch of people who are high off their making terrible decisions, and you feel like an adult needs to walk in here and take control because no one is making the right choices. I didn't like this. I didn't like it at all. But now I kind of feel like I don't know what I want to pick up next. Do I want to just pick up The Silence of the Lambs? Because I'm pretty sure I'm going to like it. I'll look around, because the book from the 70s did great. The book from the 80s, good time. Book from the 90s, not so much. Maybe I should try and find something from the early 2000s, because that still vintage. Anything before 2006, technically considered vintage. God, I'm old. I'm gonna search and I'll let you know what I think. All right, after scouring the internet, doing as many Google searches as my little thumbs could handle, I couldn't find anything published in the early 2000s that met 2 criteria. It appealed to me and was easily available. If I found something that I was like, oh, I'm very interested in picking that up, I couldn't find it quickly available to me as either ebook or audiobook, and it wasn't available at my library immediately, or I just wasn't interested. Like, I just wasn't interested in a lot of them. Or I've already read them, which I found pretty interesting how many of them I was like, oh yeah, I didn't even realize how early in the 2000s that came out. I even scoured my shelves, and ones that I thought would fit had come out in like 2009. So technically doesn't meet our criteria. So I did what I wanted and I picked up Silence of the Lambs. I will say, I am almost immediately liking Silence of the Lambs even more than I liked Red Dragon, which I'm not surprised. Although I did like Will Graham as a character, I like Clarice a little bit more. Will Graham was a character that knew the inner workings and machinations of the FBI forensic team, having worked for them previously. We are now years out from the end of Red Dragon, and Will Graham is living his retirement life in the Florida Keys, severely disfigured after the ending of the first book. And we now have Clarice, who is young, fresh-faced, and brought on by Chilton, who is the head of the department. And I find him interesting as a character because I think in the first book, he has a lot of authority, but he also knows how to gaslight people. He seems like the type of person who can find these type of people who will self-sacrifice. They are so smart, so good at their jobs, and willing to burn it all down, and Chilton lets them light themselves on fire. But he does that because it is for the greater good. He is able to see who the shining stars are, in my opinion. He now has found Clarice, and I feel like based on what happened in the last book, as well as what we're getting as far as backstory as what's going on at home, he seems to very much keep his distance from her. He has this almost air to him as like he has to use her in this case. She's an inevitable part of the case, but he seems both reluctant and gruff based on how he interacted with Will in Red Dragon. Now, they did have a history. They had known each other for longer, but how he's interacting with Clarice, I find very interesting. And I feel like because we have the backstory of him in the first book and we know what's going on at home, his character comes across as reluctantly having to have Clarice involved, but not in a like he's rude to her, mean to her type of way. He can spot these people who will burn it all down, and he sees in her this eagerness, this probably predisposition for self-sacrifice, this hungry need to prove themselves. Clarice has all of that. He sees it. And you can kind of read into it that he knows that this department is either going to turn her to stone or eat her alive. Clarice is very smart, but she's very green. She's very new. This is the first big case she's doing, but her greenness is being used by Chilton when he sends her in to meet Hannibal the Cannibal. I can't not say his name that way. Like I can't. Hannibal the Cannibal. It just works so well. So Clarice, she asks a few questions, wondering what the motives are sending her, doesn't really get any answers, but ends up in front of Hannibal to ask him some questions. When you find out, not too much later in the book after that yes, the ulterior motive was to pick Hannibal's brain, see if he could give them any insight into Buffalo Bill, who is our serial unaliver of this book. Buffalo Bill being an individual who, unlike in the first book, and maybe it'll happen a little bit farther into the book, I think I'm on chapter 14 at this point. I was gonna look for my phone, but look. Hi. She's very tired after a long walk this morning, where I listened to an insane amount of the audiobook of this already. We haven't gotten a perspective from Buffalo Bill yet. I have a feeling it's coming, but we haven't gotten it yet. We got our perspective of our bad guy in Red Dragon, so I'm assuming we get a little bit of POV from Buffalo Bill at some point, but we might not. And we're just following Clarice around as she not only shows her innate skill, but also is having to deal with a lot of things that Will didn't have to deal with as an investigator because he is a white male. And was kind of seen as this genius within the forensic field and mostly knew his way around a lot of these scenarios. Not only is Clarice having to figure out how to navigate a lot of these scenarios, she is a woman, and so there is a lot of sexism and just honestly grossness from people. She is originally from West Virginia and is able to kind of like dip into her southern drawl to relate to some of these people, some of the other police investigators and things like that, or people that she's trying to get information out of. They are more willing to give her the information she's seeking or look at her in a positive light if she has a similar accent to theirs and she knows this, she uses it to her advantage. Almost subconsciously sometimes. It's like she just knows when to slip into her accent. But she's having to deal with being a woman in this field, but also investigating the murder of these women. It's very interesting. I'm liking it so far. I will say the audiobook that I'm listening to has an opening, because it was like the 20-something anniversary of this book, the opening that is read by the author on the audiobook, and his small details about he was previously, I believe must have been some sort of reporter, investigative reporter having to do with crime. And so he talks about some of the people he met that became inspiration to some of the characters in these books, specifically who inspired Hannibal as a character super interesting, but he also has this like really poignant line that this person that inspired Hannibal said to him, that when he said it, I was like, oh my gosh, if I wasn't listening to an audiobook, highlight that. Like, what do you mean? This person was talking about an individual who was in prison for committing many, many crimes. He had a cleft palate and had a very not successful surgery at some point. So he had a lot of scarring and asymmetry to his face. And when this individual who inspired Hannibal was talking about this person, he said the quote, "Early torment makes torment imaginable." Some of these people who endure very violent and abusive childhoods, when they become adults, are preemptively choose those who would be abusers. So this person had chosen very attractive young children because he could imagine them tormenting him as a child. It was interesting, kind of the psychology behind like why certain victims were chosen. Enduring torment makes torment imaginable. I would just like sat there and I was like, well, no wonder you made a whole psychopath character around this person. They were so eloquent. Super interesting. Also, the author, Thomas Harris, it's Thomas Harris, right? What am I even listening to? What even is my name? I almost just said Tom. I don't know this man well enough to just be calling him good. Hey, Tom. Thomas Harris. I haven't looked where he is from, but he has a slight Southern accent to him. And so when he speaks about Southern people and their colloquialisms, they feel very realistic. Because that is one of my pet peeves. People who, they make parodies of Southern colloquialisms because they don't understand the mathematic equation that is a proper colloquialism. People in the South be using word magic to come up with some of this stuff. And when you get it right, you get it right. And when you get it wrong, it's so obvious you don't know what you're talking about. Anyways, I am enjoying Silence of the Lambs. Of course I am. I think it might be one of my top horror movies as far as ones I've seen so many times. Like the amount of times I've watched that movie. I can't even think what else would be on that list. It's definitely up there, even not with horror movies, just movies I've watched way too many times in general. But so far, I think it is following the character of Clarice that I'm really liking. And I'm really liking this book. I am not surprised and have a feeling that I'm absolutely gonna fly through it once again. We finished a book. I finished Silence of the Lambs, and I liked it even better than Red Dragon. I liked Red Dragon, but this was definitely, and maybe some of it is nostalgia. I don't know. I truly enjoyed this. There are slight differences from the movie to the book, but overall, Clarice is the same character. She is this very good person, but also very hungry to prove herself, to solve this case. There is a ticking time bomb that is Buffalo Bill making his next victim, finishing his lady suit. But overall, I truly enjoyed this. I think we get a decent bit more Hannibal in this one as well. He is still a very small character. It's just his presence is so big. I also felt like Clarice being a new investigator and trying to figure things out, she was clever, she is smart, but she's like not otherworldly smart. She isn't some prodigy. She's going to be great at this, but she's still brand new. I think there is like one more book in this series. I don't know if I want to pick it up because I kind of like Clarice here. Will Graham was not treated good at the end of his book. Clarice makes it out of this book. I don't want to see Clarice get hurt. I will say there are some things that did not age well, specifically Buffalo Bill's character and talking about his gender identity and the transgender community in general, some of the verbiage they use, but also some of the ways they talk about things and how this character is portrayed. Someone much better than me was probably been incredibly eloquent about what kind of doesn't work about that. I couldn't tell you exactly what doesn't work, but it does feel aged. Like it doesn't feel like something that would necessarily be the way we would speak around these characters now. With the knowledge we have and just in general, I would say that's the thing that's aged the most poorly of the entire book. So I overall Had a great time with Silence of the Lambs. And now I feel like very much a horror reader. Like, of course I've read Red Dragon and Silence of the Lambs. Haven't you? Of course I've read Rosemary's Baby. I'm a real reader. Of course I read Cipher and wanted to bang my head against a wall. Anyways, we have read some damn books and it's time for me to end this vlog. I hope you had fun hanging out with me and the dogs. And at this point, if you haven't gone in the comments and told me about your favorite vintage horror book, I think it's about time. I think it's about time you go tell me what I need to be picking up next so I can be a well-read vintage horror reader. But if you had fun hanging out with me and the dogs, please subscribe and I'll see you next time.